Most middle-class Americans believe they are financially responsible. They pay their bills on time, contribute to a 401k, keep some cash in the bank, and avoid obvious financial mistakes. On paper, everything looks reasonable, and yet many of them feel permanently one setback away from stress. The reason is not income. It is a rule almost no one explains clearly. What happens before and after your first $10,000? The real problem is that most people never treat the first $10,000 as a structural threshold. They see it as savings, not as a system change. As a result, they behave the same way financially at $2,000, $5,000, and $9,000 as they do at zero. The math says that's a mistake for a middle-class household earning $60,000 to $90,000 per year. The difference between having $1,000 and $10,000 in accessible savings is not incremental, it is categorical. Below $10,000, almost any unexpected expense becomes a crisis. A $2,200 car repair, a $2,000 medical bill, or a short gap in income immediately forces a choice between debt, liquidation, or stress. Above $10,000, the same events are absorbed without changing long-term plans. Yet most people think they are doing the right thing by splitting limited cash between saving, investing, and lifestyle upgrades before this threshold is reached. They put $200 into investments, $150 into a vacation fund, $100 into upgrades, and whatever is left into savings. This feels balanced. In reality, it delays the only buffer that actually stabilizes the system. Consider the numbers. A household with $3,000 in savings and a $4,000 monthly expense base has less than 3 weeks of real flexibility. Any disruption immediately pushes them into credit. Credit card interest at 20% doesn't just cost money, it reverses progress. One $3,000 balance carried for a year can erase an entire year of careful saving. The middle class is especially vulnerable to this mistake because income creates a false sense of safety. Regular paychecks mask the fragility of low liquidity. People assume that as long as income continues, savings don't need to be structurally strong. But income is not a buffer. Cash is. The consequence of ignoring this rule is subtle but persistent. Financial decisions become reactive instead of deliberate. Investments are interrupted. Savings are rebuilt repeatedly from zero. Stress remains constant even as income grows. Over 10 years, this pattern can easily cost tens of thousands of dollars in interest, missed investment growth, and forced timing mistakes. The issue is not discipline or intelligence, it is a missing framework. No one explains that the first financial objective is not diversification, optimization, or lifestyle balance. It is crossing a minimum liquidity threshold that changes how money behaves in your life. Until that threshold is reached, every other financial move is weaker than it looks. To understand why the $10,000 rule is so often ignored, it's important to look at how middle-class finances are actually structured. Most households do not operate with a clear financial hierarchy. Income arrives monthly, expenses flow out automatically, and whatever remains is divided across multiple goals without a defined order of priority. This creates activity, but not stability. The core issue is liquidity fragmentation. Instead of building one strong buffer, money is spread thin across savings accounts, retirement contributions, short-term goals, and lifestyle spending. Each allocation feels responsible in isolation. Collectively, they fail to create resilience. Behavior plays a major role. Many people are taught that investing early is always the top priority. As a result, they start investing before their cash position is stable. This creates a contradiction. When an unexpected expense appears, investments are paused, sold, or avoided altogether to cover the gap. The habit of investing exists, but it is fragile because it depends on uninterrupted income and zero surprises. Consider a realistic scenario. A household earns $75,000 per year and saves $400 per month. They split this into $200 for retirement, $100 for travel, and $100 for savings. After 1 year, they have won $200 in savings and only $400 invested. On paper, this looks disciplined. In reality, they are still one moderate expense away from debt. A $2,000 car repair wipes out savings and forces them to pause contributions or use credit. The system resets. Progress is erased. Now compare that to a different structure. The same household directs the full $400 per month into cash until they reach $10,000. This takes about 25 months. During that time, they invest less, but once the buffer is complete, their behavior changes. Expenses no longer disrupt plans. Investments become consistent. Decisions become proactive rather than defensive. Standard financial advice often fails here because it assumes stability that does not yet exist. Advice like always invest, a fixed percentage, or diversify early works well only after a basic liquidity foundation is in place. Before that, it increases complexity without reducing risk. Another reason the problem persists is psychological. A savings account growing from $2,000 to $4,000 feels slow and unrewarding compared to seeing investments fluctuate or lifestyle upgrades deliver immediate satisfaction. The benefit of liquidity is invisible until it is needed. Because of that, it is undervalued. There is also a timing mismatch. Emergencies do not wait for financial plans to mature. They arrive randomly and demand immediate cash. Without a sufficient buffer, households are forced into suboptimal decisions at the worst possible moment. This is not a failure of planning effort, but of planning order. The deeper issue is the absence of a system that recognizes phases. Financial behavior below $10,000 must be different from behavior above it. Treating both phases the same leads to constant instability. Until the structure changes, income growth alone will not fix the problem. More money simply flows through the same fragile system. The result is motion without progress and stress without clarity. The failure to reach and protect the first $10,000 is not caused by one bad choice. It is the result of several common mistakes that reinforce each other over time. These mistakes are widespread across the middle class and persist regardless of income level. The first mistake is treating savings as optional instead of structural. Many households save what's left after expenses, investing, and lifestyle spending. This approach guarantees inconsistency. In practice, savings become the shock absorber for every disruption. Over 5 years, this leads to repeated cycles of building a few $1,000s, losing it, and starting again. The result is motion without accumulation. The second mistake is investing before liquidity is stable. Investing $200 per month feels productive, but without a sufficient cash buffer, those contributions are fragile. A single $3,000 unexpected expense can pause investing for months. Over 10 years, repeated interruptions can easily reduce total invested capital by $15,000, $25,000, compared to a scenario with uninterrupted contributions. The loss is not theoretical. It is the direct result of forced stops. The third mistake is using credit as a substitute for cash. Credit cards are often framed as emergency tools. In reality, they convert short-term problems into long-term costs. Carrying a $4,000 balance at 20% interest costs, roughly $800 per year. If this happens once every few years, the cumulative interest over 20 years can exceed $10,000. That is money paid not for consumption, but for timing errors. The fourth mistake is confusing income stability with financial stability. A steady paycheck creates confidence, but it does not eliminate risk. Income can be delayed, reduced, or interrupted. Expenses do not pause. Without cash, even high earners are forced into reactive decisions. This is why households earning $90,000 can feel more fragile than those earning $60,000 with stronger liquidity. The long-term consequences follow a clear pattern. After 5 years, households without a protected $10,000 buffer experience higher financial stress and inconsistent progress. Savings exist, but they are repeatedly depleted. After 10 years, the cost becomes visible. Missed investment contributions, interest payments, and forced withdrawals can easily total $30,000, $50,000 compared to a stable system. After 20 years, the gap becomes structural. Two households with similar incomes can differ by over $100,000 in net worth purely due to liquidity management. To illustrate this, consider two scenarios. Scenario A household saves and invests simultaneously but never prioritizes liquidity. Emergencies are handled with credit and contribution pauses. Scenario B, the same household focuses first on reaching $10,000 in cash, then invests consistently without interruption. The income is identical. The behavior is not. Over 2 decades, Scenario B produces higher net worth, lower stress, and better decision making, not because of higher returns, but because the system is stable. The core insight is this: the problem is not how much people earn, it is the order in which they deploy money. Without crossing the $10,000 threshold, every financial plan remains vulnerable to disruption. The solution to the $10,000 problem is not about earning more, cutting everything, or finding better investments. It is about changing the order of financial priorities. The rule is simple. Before optimizing anything else, build and protect a minimum liquidity base of $10,000. This is not a goal for comfort, it is a requirement for stability. The mechanics work because liquidity changes how every other financial decision behaves. The first step is temporary prioritization. For a defined period, cash accumulation becomes the primary objective. This does not mean abandoning retirement accounts forever. It means reducing them to the minimum needed to capture employer matches, if applicable, and redirecting the remaining surplus toward cash. The logic is straightforward. Match contributions are immediate returns. Everything else can wait until the system is stable. The second step is isolation. The $10,000 must be treated as a structural reserve, not general savings. It is not for vacations, upgrades, or discretionary purchases. It exists to absorb shocks. This separation is critical. If the buffer is allowed to drift into normal spending, it loses its function and the system collapses back into fragility. The third step is accessibility without temptation. The money should be easy to access in a real emergency, but not so visible that it invites casual use. A separate high-yield savings account works well for this purpose. The goal is not return, but reliability. Even modest interest is sufficient. Stability is the priority. Once the threshold is reached, behavior changes automatically. Unexpected expenses no longer disrupt plans. Investments are no longer paused. Credit use drops sharply. Financial decisions become proactive instead of reactive. This is why the solution is stable. It removes the need for constant judgment calls under stress. Consider the mechanics in practice. A household with $4,000 in savings faces a $2,500 expense. The result is immediate disruption. Savings are depleted, credit fills the gap, and future plans are paused. The same household with $12,000 absorbs the cost without changing trajectory. The difference is not income, discipline, or intelligence. It is position. This approach is not risky because it does not depend on forecasts or market performance. It depends on certainty. Cash does exactly what it is supposed to do. It buys time and prevents forced decisions. In financial systems, avoiding forced decisions is one of the most reliable ways to improve outcomes. Critically, this is not a permanent stance. The $10,000 is a phase transition, not an endpoint. Once reached, surplus cash flow can be reallocated with confidence. Investing becomes consistent. Long-term planning becomes realistic. Risk becomes optional rather than imposed. Many people resist this solution because it feels slow or inefficient. In reality, it accelerates progress by removing repeated setbacks. A system that moves forward without interruption will outperform a more optimized system that resets every few years. The mechanics are simple, repeatable, and durable. That is why they work. When liquidity comes first, everything else becomes easier to manage. When everything is put together, The $10,000 rule becomes a clear and practical system rather than an abstract idea. The system is built around sequence, not complexity. It recognizes that financial behavior must change depending on position, not aspiration. The structure has three phases. Phase 1, below $10,000. In this phase, the objective is not optimization, it is stability. Cash accumulation takes priority over all non-essential goals. Investing beyond employer matches is paused. Lifestyle upgrades are delayed. Savings are protected from discretionary use. The purpose is to cross a threshold where money stops reacting to every disruption. Phase 2, between $10,000 and consistency. Once the buffer exists, behavior changes naturally. Emergencies no longer reset progress. Investments can run uninterrupted. Credit use drops sharply. This is where financial systems start to compound, not because returns are higher, but because interruptions are removed. Phase 3, long-term allocation. Only after liquidity is stable does it make sense to optimize asset allocation, increase investment contributions, or take calculated risks. At this point, decisions are deliberate rather than defensive. What changes over time is predictable. After 1 year, the primary shift is psychological and practical. Financial stress decreases because small crises no longer dictate decisions. Cash flow becomes more predictable. Planning feels real instead of fragile. After 5 years, the difference is measurable. Investments grow without repeated pauses. Credit balances are lower or non-existent. The household experiences fewer setbacks and recovers faster from unexpected costs. The compounding effect of consistency begins to show. After 10 years, the gap becomes structural. Two households with the same income but different liquidity discipline can be separated by tens of thousands of dollars in net worth. One continues reacting to events, the other operates with margin and control. The immediate action steps are straightforward. First, calculate current liquid savings, not investments, not retirement accounts, only cash that can be accessed quickly. Second, define $10,000 as non-negotiable structural capital, not flexible savings. Third, redirect surplus cash flow toward this target until it is reached, even if it temporarily slows other goals. Fourth, isolate the buffer in a separate account and restrict its use to true disruptions. Fifth, once the threshold is crossed, restore long-term investing and planning with confidence. This approach works because it reduces fragility before chasing growth. It does not assume perfect behavior, stable markets, or uninterrupted income. It assumes reality. Surprises happen, expenses arrive at bad times, and systems fail under stress. The $10,000 rule is not about wealth. It is about control. It creates a base from which better decisions become possible and repeatable. People do not struggle financially because they lack ambition or income. They struggle because their systems break under pressure. When liquidity comes first, pressure decreases. When pressure decreases, decisions improve. Over time, that difference compounds more reliably than any optimization strategy ever could.